Okay, last one in this unit that we'll be testing on is the law of cosines. Now, the law of cosines you use when you are told side, 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 so you're given 3 sides in a row, or side, angle, side, where you're given a side, an angle in between, and then another side. So you have 2 sides and an angle in between. That's when you use the law of cosines. Now, the law of cosines goes like this. It always equals one of your sides, so let's use side A, and you square that. Now that's a big deal, A is squared, equals, and then we have B squared plus C squared, so it's the other 2 sides squared. This looks like the Pythagorean theorem, doesn't it? But then we do this, we subtract 2 times B times C, so those 2 are the 2 sides you have here. You notice they're here, only it's multiplied. And then it's still times the cosine of the angle opposite the side that is over here. So if this is A, this is A. Okay, well, what if this was B? So if this was B squared, then it would be A squared plus C squared. It'd be the other 2 sides squared, added together, minus 2AC, again, those 2 sides match up to the 2 sides you have on that same side, times the cosine of, let's see, I've got side B over there, so it's angle B. And then we can have that third one is C squared equals, and then we've got A squared plus B squared minus 2AB, and then times the cosine of angle C. So that's how they're set up. That's kind of what they're from. And then it's just a matter of using them, plugging in what you know and finding what you don't know. So we're going to look at 2 examples to show you how this works. So here you'll see that I am given 3 sides, and so that's when we use sides or law of sines, because we have side, side, side. Now I need to find any of these angles, but remember in the law of cosines we only have one angle, right? We have that, it's the cosine of whatever angle at the end. And so my hint to you is always, always, always work with your biggest side. Okay, work with your longest side. If you don't, if you work with one of these other ones, then you're getting yourself into that ambiguous case for the law of sines. You don't want that. You always want to stay with just one triangle. So always work with your biggest side. So because B equals 19 is my biggest side, I'm going to use the formula B squared equals A squared plus C squared minus 2AC times the cosine of B. Okay? So that's what I'm going to use. So I start plugging in. I know that B is 19, so I've got 19 squared equals A squared, 8 squared, plus 14 squared, minus 2 times A is 8, C is 14, times the cosine of B, and I don't know that. Okay, now I go through and I do the math. So I've got 19 squared is 361 equals 64 plus 14 squared is 196 minus, I'm going to take 2 times 8 times 14, and I get 224 cosine B. Okay, and I'm going to add together what I can. Now, here's the big mistake people make. You got to back up here a little bit. Okay, we have a 64 plus 196 minus 224 cosine B. This 224 is attached to the cosine B. I cannot subtract 224. All I can do is add those 2 together. So I've got 361 equals 64 plus 196, which is 260 minus 224 cosine B. Okay, now I've got 224 cosine B. That's stuck there. So think of this as like being 224x. I can't put that together with that, right? So now I'm just trying to get the cosine by itself. So I'm going to get rid of the 260. So I subtract 260 from both sides. Okay, so that gives me 101 equals negative 224 cosine B. And then I divide both sides by negative 224. So I got 101 divided by 224. Okay, and that is negative. All right, so now I have, if I follow this over, I have a negative 0.45 equals cosine B. And then I do the inverse of cosine so I can figure out what B is. And of course, I'm going to try and use the answer button on my calculator. And so then I get that B equals 116.8. Okay, and so that's what angle B is, 116.8. All right, and then, now that I'm done with that, Now, I don't have to use law of cosines anymore. I can just go ahead and use law of sines. I have side, angle, side, so I can go ahead and use my law of sines and find my other two angles. For instance, let's see, I can go sine of 116.8 degrees over 19 equals sine of c over 14, right? And so then I cross multiply and divide, and here's the cool part. Because, if you remember at the beginning of this problem, because we use the longest side here, right? We use the longest side to figure out our biggest angle. We don't have to worry about the ambiguous case for sine. We just go ahead and solve. Okay, so then we find angle C. And let me see if I have that written down. I do. Angle C, we find then, if you go through the work, is 41.12. And then we can just take that away from 180, and angle A is 22.08. All right, so that is how you use the law of cosines on that one. Let me show you another one. So here I have this. Notice that I have side, angle, side, which is another reason when you use, if you look on your formula sheet, it'll say side, angle, side for law of cosines, and you'll get the formula sheet on a test. So this whole sheet is used on the test, and so you'll use this little Q, side, angle, side means the law of cosines. Now this one, you don't have a choice on longest side or anything because you are told an angle, and that's what you're going to have to use. And because my angle is angle A, I'm going to be using the side A one. So I'm going to be using that A squared equals B squared plus C squared minus 2BC times the cosine of C. Right? I'm going to be using that one, and the reason I am is because, oh, I lied. What a liar. This is angle A, right? Because, how does that work? The angle always matches up with the side right here on the other side of the equal sign. So, cosine of A. So I have angle A, that means I must have side A there and angle A there. Okay, so let's plug in. So A I don't know, that's A squared equals, B is 15, so 15 squared, plus C is 10. Minus 2 times 15 times 10 times the cosine of 115 degrees. And so I just go through and do my work here. 15 squared is 225 plus 10 squared is 100 minus 2 times 15 times 10 gives me 300 times the cosine of 115, which is negative 0.4226, and so on. And then we just keep on going. So we got 225 plus 100, that's 325, minus, and then I need to take that 0.4226 times 300. Okay, so that's going to be a plus actually, because if you notice, I have a negative times a negative, so that's going to be a plus. So plus 126.785. Okay, so, oops. Let me fix that. I'm making it a positive on my calculator. And I add that to 325, and I get that A squared equals 451.785. Okay, now that's not my answer because that's what A squared is. I want to figure out what A is, so I need to square root that. So I square root my answer, and I get that A equals 21.26 about. Okay, so that's 21.26, and then I can use law of sines for the rest. For instance, I can say the sine of C over 10 equals the sine of 115 over 21.26. So I cross multiply, divide, and notice you'll get sine of C equals whatever number that is, and then I'm going to have to do sine inverse of that number, gives me the C value so that I can get that. But again, we don't have to worry about the ambiguous case here. When you use the law of sines, if you use it appropriately, you don't have to worry about the ambiguous case. And the only time you have to worry about it appropriately is when you're given side, 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 and you just make sure you work with the longest side first. All right, that is law of cosines. Good luck.